Dale Carnegie was a prosperous American writer and professor. He was a pioneer in developing courses related to self-improvement, salesmanship, public speaking, and relationship skills. He passed away in 1955 at the age of 66. This book was originally published as a textbook for a course instructed by Carnegie, who felt there was a lack of accessible material related to the context of his class. Originally published in 1936, upwards of 30 million copies of Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People have been sold worldwide. This book remains to be a relevant source of self-improvement literature in today's age. In this book, Carnegie reveals a number of basic principles regarding how one should approach human interaction in order to better one's impression on others. This includes gaining skills on social influence in order to better understand the nature of human instincts. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Part 1, focuses on fundamental techniques in handling others. The first principle is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. A quote from the text: "Criticism is futile because it puts a person on defense and usually makes him strive to justify himself. It is dangerous because it wounds a person's pride, hurts his sense of importance, and arouses resentment. Rather than condemning those around us, let's figure out why they act. This is much more beneficial as well as interesting." Principle 2 is give honest and sincere appreciation. In order to get someone to do something, you must make them believe it's something that they wanted to do in the first place. John Dewey, an American philosopher, said that the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important. Every one of us is driven by this need. Imagine the miracle we could give people by honest appreciation and praise.
Part 2 of the book is titled 6 Ways to Make People Like You and highlights the importance of 6 principles. These principles are all rooted in the importance of showing genuine interest in people and what interests them, recognizing and reiterating their importance as an individual, and presenting positive body language and expression. By mastering these principles, the act of winning friends and creating meaningful connections becomes a much easier and more enjoyable experience. The 6 principles include becoming genuinely interested in other people, using a smile and positive body language to communicate, remembering that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language, being a good listener and encouraging others to talk about themselves, talking in terms of the other person's interests, and making the other person feel important and doing it sincerely.
There are 12 principles outlined in Part 3, How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. First, the only way to get the best out of an argument is to avoid it. Second, show respect for the other people's opinions. Never say you're wrong. Third, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and empathetically. Fourth, begin in a friendly way. Fifth, get the other person saying, yes, yes, immediately. Sixth, let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Seventh, let the other person feel like the idea is his or hers. Eighth, try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. 9, be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. 10, appeal to the nobler motives. 11, dramatize your ideas. And 12, throw down a challenge. These principles outline the importance of approaching all conversations, complaints, or argumentative situations with kindness and empathy by listening to what the other person has to say with respect for their opinion. Do not enter conversations with anger. Always begin in a friendly way, as the only way to get the best out of an argument is to avoid it. Seek to learn something from each argument by actively listening to what the other person has to say, and in return, they will show you respect back and hear your side of the conversation. If you realize you are wrong, admit it right away and see it as a valuable lesson.
Additionally, Part 3 discusses letting the other person do most of the talking in order to hear their point of view and understand the reasoning behind their opinion. This way, you are not making assumptions about their stance or what they are looking for. Lastly, Carnegie states that when all efforts to motivate people do not seem to get the job done, encourage competition through comments that make the person want to work hard and prove themselves. This is one way in which the idea of allowing people to think something was their own idea gains cooperation in getting them to do the things you want. Overall, the theme of Part 3 shows us that it is better to take the blow to your own pride than to make someone else feel threatened.
On the screen is 9 of Carnegie's principles for this chapter outlined. He believes that if we praise the things someone does right and we minimize their errors, they're likely to perform better and are much more willing to succeed. When we praise and appreciate with sincerity, we're able to criticize and find faults in others, but as long as we begin the conversation with praise, Carnegie finds that one is able to succeed. When we use praise indirectly to lead to the correction of one's mistakes, we should eliminate the term but and instead use the word and, which allows the individual to give criticism through praise. Before we acknowledge other people's mistakes, we should recognize our own faults first, then merely suggest a solution that we've learned ourselves. When we acknowledge our own mistakes before criticizing the faults of others, people are able to see that everybody makes mistakes, and they're motivated to succeed. We should avoid resentment when giving orders. Nobody wants to be told to do something. We should offer suggestions for the other person to accomplish a task through thinking for themselves. We should ask thought-provoking questions that stimulate their creative and thinking abilities, allowing them to think for themselves and have completion of the task through their own decision-making. We should also be considerate of the other person's pride in themselves and their ego. When we damage that, they're not able to perform as well. Instead of acting with condemnation, we should praise and acknowledge the small improvements of others. We should pay no attention to their wrongdoings and only their accomplishments. Through recognizing their specific actions through praise, these actions will continue and their faults will become obsolete. No one wants flattery or insincerity, so we should speak from the heart and good things will be accomplished. When you give someone a reputation to live up to, they'll do their due diligence to achieve that reputation. When we encourage, make the task appear as easy, and let the individual know that they are talented in their skills of task, we're ensuring our faith in them. We must be certain about what we're asking of someone and let them know of their personal benefits of completing the task. When someone is aware that they will personally benefit from completion of the task, they're far more likely to want to complete it.
Most would agree that Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is not as revelatory in a contemporary context as it might have been, especially for businessmen in the late 1930s. Nonetheless, it serves as a timeless guide for navigating human relations, or maybe more accurately in today's digital age, as a refresher. It was written at the tail end of the Great Depression when American unemployment was rife and people were clinging to any semblance of hope they had. So in this sense, Carnegie provided resounding evidence or advice that was applicable for fearful workers of the Great Depression. And the ideas that he presents may seem fairly obvious today and maybe even outdated, but on the other hand, the underlying primordial importance that he places on emotional intelligence and positivity ring particularly loudly within the context of the modern freelance market and gig economy. And so this idea of being adaptable and easy to work with remains highly pertinent today. Carnegie's strategic use of writing style, tone, and format have, at least in part, facilitated the book's successful reception. So given that this text is a supplemental resource to his lectures, he writes as if he's speaking, which helps maintain a more informal and friendly tone. The reading format is also highly accessible in that it's logically broken down into 4 main sections that include summations of the principles at the end of each segment. Carnegie delivers concrete information in a concise manner and relies heavily on a plethora of examples and anecdotes of notably great men to illustrate his principles, or rather their real-world applications, in a story-like way. And they offer potent reminders of true leadership, like the importance of listening, praise and encouragement, and the ability to be authoritative but gentle, to name a few, which duly inform the pillars in which Carnegie's principles were built upon. So overall, in an attempt to provide readers with the fundamental principles of human relationships, Carnegie actually begins a probe into the deeply emotional nature of human beings. And whether we admit it or not, we intrinsically strive for what the title of the book suggests. The overall theme is built on the premise that business can be a mutually beneficial experience. Carnegie's approach to human relations is embedded in the knowledge of understanding our nature, particularly our egos, self-esteem, and self-interest, and how we might internalize the principles he provides in accordance with these underlying concepts.
Our critical analysis also highlights some points of controversy within Carnegie's book. As the title suggests, the premise of the book is about winning friends and influencing people on a universal scale. In fact, Carnegie points out that housewives and engineers alike can take something out of his pages, And while this may be true, the book seems more directed to business professionals and salespeople than anyone else. In all 12 principles, a couple key concepts ring through. Be agreeable and address the best in people. While this may be particularly helpful during business interactions, some of these ideas seem to neglect the fact that conflict is a natural part of life. The world does not run simply on everyone being agreeable to one another, and honest and sincere friendship often involves discussing hard truths. In fact, multiple authors have successfully researched and debated that arguments can be healthy for human relationships, which goes against Carnegie's very first principle in his third section, namely that, to quote, "the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it," unquote. Likewise, the hope that everyone can be honest and genuine with him or herself merits the very fact that rejection and differences in perspective is commonplace. It is seldom that humans see eye to eye, and rather than making oneself most agreeable, there's something that needs to be said about accepting these circumstances as a natural process of being. To that end, it is important to remember that this volume was originally written as a textbook, and that these principles should be taken with a grain of salt, especially as a matter of human interaction is not a textbook process. If applied word for word, the consequences of insincerity present themselves at large. Instead of wholly and religiously practicing these principles, as Carnegie recommends, might it be just as effective to sift and tailor these ideas to the unique social positions in which we are all a part? Consider the following. If a businessman in the 1950s religiously practiced these principles, and later a modern woman in today's workforce did the same, would they have the same results? On a more radical scale, consider the impact, or lack thereof, if working women continue to abide by such principles as let the other person do a great deal of the talking, or never say you're wrong. In a volume that deals directly with human communication, Carnegie fails to address that different social contexts have a substantial impact on how we interact within society, business place, or even our individual relationships. Instead, he addresses his audience as one and the same, which seems to work wonderfully if you are, preferably, a man in business or the sales industry, but requires hindsight if you're actually looking to win friends and influence people on a general scale.